All right, dudes, we are going to be making some rough puff pastry today. It's kind of daunting, but it's not actually that hard in reality. So I'm going to show you how to make that really quickly. And then if you stick around, there's a little bonus rhubarb tart recipe right at the end. Rolling, rolling, rolling out the pastry. Firstly, we're going to dump 250 grams of plain flour out onto our work surface. Then I've got 50 grams of very cold, cubed, unsalted butter to scatter over the top. And lastly, half a teaspoon of salt sprinkled onto. It's really simple ingredients here, but it's all about the method. It's a little bit involved, but I promise you it's not that tricky, so just stick with me, guys. Okay, now we're going to be using our thumbs and fingertips to rub the butter into the flour. It's kind of like a pinching motion that you're going to be using here. And we're just going to do this until it looks crumbly. Now form that floury mixture into a nice mound on the counter and then make a well in the centre. Kind of like if you're making pasta dough, but instead of eggs, we're just going to be putting some ice water in here in a sec. Making pastry like this seems like it's a really messy thing to do, but I promise you it's a lot easier than having to clean up a food processor right at the end, because all you have to do is wipe down your counter, and I'm all about that easy life. I've grabbed my scales to weigh out 75 grams of water. I like to weigh it since 1 gram of water pretty much equals 1 milliliter of water, so it's quite an accurate way of doing things. But if you just have a measuring jug, that's totally fine too. So go ahead and pour half the water into the well you just made, and then use your fingertips to gradually draw the flour in from the edges into the centre. You want to gently work this together. Once it starts to look dry, you can make another well, pour in the remaining water, and then knead it together again really gently to form a dry dough. Now my dough was looking a bit too dry here, so I drizzled on a little bit more of the ice water to help it along. You want a dough that's not too sticky with some floury patches remaining. It's going to look kind of messy. So just setting aside the dough for a minute, we're going to do what is probably the most satisfying part of this whole process. We're going to be grating some very cold butter. I've got 100 grams of frozen unsalted butter that I let sit out for about 10 minutes to soften, and we're going to grate this up on a box grater using the side with the largest holes. Let's grab that dough again and then get a rolling pin, and once you've got your rolling pin and a tiny measuring tape in my case, or any kind of preferred measuring tool, your choice, we can get rolling. Roll the dough out into an 8 by 13 inch rectangle. As my dough had some dry patches, I didn't need to dust the surface with flour at all, but if yours is looking a little bit sticky, you may need a dusting of flour in there, because if you don't have that, it's going to stick and that's going to be a nightmare later on, so trust your own judgment. Once we've got the rectangle, spread the grated butter out over the left 2/3 of the rectangle. Then just pat this down and give it a little bit of a roll to compact those buttery shreds. What happens next is the essential part of making puff pastry. We are going to fold it together into thirds like a business letter. To do this, we grab the right hand side of the dough, which isn't covered with butter, and fold it over the centre third of the dough. Then grab the left-hand third of the dough and fold it over the centre third of the dough, so you get a nice little parcel. As you can see, if you're not used to folding things into thirds, it might take you a few tries to get it even, but that is totally fine. I'm going to dust this with a bit of flour now to stop it sticking to the surface and my rolling pin, and we're going to roll it out again into, you guessed it, an 8 by 13 inch rectangle, and do another business letter fold. Okay, now, last time. Roll it out into an 8 by 13 inch rectangle and our last business letter fold. And we are done. I'm going to pop this into a resealable bag and then whack it in the fridge for at least an hour so that the pastry can chill, so it's easier to roll, and the butter can cool down. And here we have it. I'm gonna cut it in half to try and show you guys the layers that we've created. You should be able to see defined layers of dough and butter sandwiched together in a beautiful pattern. This is the magic part of the pastry, guys. It's what's gonna make it rise when it's in the oven, because all those layers of butter that we so carefully crafted are gonna melt, and the water in it turns to steam and forces its way out of the pastry, causing the dough layers to puff apart. Now, as a little bonus, I'm going to be making some quick rhubarb tartlets using this dough. To do this, we're going to take half the dough we just made and roll it out, again, into a 10 by 10 inch square, which we then trim and cut into neat little quarters. Now, this is hard to explain, but I'm going to do my best for you guys, okay? We're going to make 4 cuts in each square, 1 centimetre in from the edge. You want to cut leaving 2 opposing corners connected so that you can fold the edges over to meet the opposite corner of the square. It's really, really confusing to explain, but hopefully by watching the video you can see what the hell I'm talking about. Now, take a little bit of beaten egg and brush it under the flaps of pastry you just made to help stick them down. Then take some more beaten egg and brush it over the whole border of the pastries so they get nice and shiny and golden when they bake. The last thing you need to do is prick the centre of each pastry a few times with a fork, and that is literally just to stop the middle of the pastry puffing up when they bake. I'm chilling my pastries for 10 minutes as my oven preheats, because the chilling just helps ensure the butter is really nice and cold, so it gives us a great puff in the oven. So after 10 minutes in the oven, the pastries will look lightly golden, like this. So we're going to spoon some filling in now. I've got equal quantities of finely chopped hazelnuts and granulated sugar here to go in first. Then I'm topping that with a few chunks of raw rhubarb. I like to rub a little bit more egg wash onto the edges of the pastry now before returning them to the oven for a further 10 minutes. Once they're baked, these guys should look darkly golden around the edges and the rhubarb should be nice and soft. I'm brushing them with a little bit of maple syrup, or you can use honey or simple syrup just to make them look nice and shiny like they're in a French pastry shop. And I'm sprinkling on some pearl sugar for decorative flair. See how easy was that? I mean, it's no problem, no big deal, you know? You could be a pastry chef. Now that you know how to make some rough puff pastry for yourself, why don't you give it a go? Tell me what you've been making. Then give me a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.